Okay, we're going to switch gears now from talking about the laws and cases to talking about steps you can take to ensure effective compliance practices within your organization. I'm going to begin with the compliance program basics. I'm also going to go over OIG guidance, where to find them on our website, and also how best to use them. And after I'm finished, my colleague Tony Maida is going to go over some more advanced compliance program concepts, so be sure to stay tuned for that. What we're not going to talk about today are the mandatory compliance program requirements under the Affordable Care Act, and that's because we can't. There are no specific proposals to date. In the fall, CMS solicited broad comments to gather industry feedback, but the requirements are still in the making. Here's what we do know. We know that the healthcare reform law includes a requirement for providers and suppliers to have compliance plans as a condition of enrollment. There is a separate requirement aimed specifically at nursing facilities. They must have a compliance program by March of 2013. For everyone else, the implementation timeline is not yet defined, but it will be. We also know that CMS solicited comments on the 7 elements of an effective compliance and ethics program as described in the United States Federal Sentencing Guidelines Manual. Specifically, CMS saw comments on using these 7 elements as the basis for the core elements of the required compliance programs. OIG has long identified these 7 elements as fundamental to any compliance program. We're going to go over those in a few minutes. So while the specifics are still being ironed out through the regulatory process, we do know that compliance practices will be mandatory soon enough. OIG has promoted voluntary compliance programs for years through a number of guidance documents, the most well-known being our compliance program guidances, which are tailored to specific industry sectors. And I'm going to talk more about those later as well. So let's begin with what is a compliance program. At its most basic level, a compliance program is a set of internal policies and procedures that you put into place to help your organization comply with the law. An effective compliance program can enhance your organization's operations, improve quality of care, and reduce overall costs. It can help you identify problems up front before they become systemic and costly. So you might be thinking, okay, I get it, having a compliance program is important. Where is that gold standard model compliance program that I can use? OIG has put out a lot of guidance on compliance programs, but we have never been able to provide a model, and that's because every organization is different. The specific needs for your organization are going to be different from the person sitting next to you. So what we have provided are principles to follow when coming up with a compliance program that best suits your organization's needs. And we've also identified fraud and abuse risk areas to watch out for. That said, a good place for everyone to start is with the sentencing guidelines, 7 elements that I mentioned earlier. Now, why are these elements located in the sentencing guidelines? That's exactly where none of us want to end up. Well, the background here is that the sentencing guidelines were created to make sentencing in the federal court system uniform across the country. To achieve this uniformity, violations and aggravating circumstances were assigned point values that the judge would add up, but there were also mitigating factors with assigned point values that would reduce the total. The reason why the compliance program 7 elements can be found in the sentencing guidelines is because having an effective compliance program is a good thing. It is a mitigating factor that leads to a reduction in points used for sentencing. I'm going to stop using that word sentencing, and we're going to walk through the 7 elements. So, written policies and procedures. Once you figure out the standards of conduct and other policies that make sense for your compliance program, write them down and share them with everyone in your organization. Putting a binder of these policies on a shelf only to collect dust is not an effective compliance program. You have to update your policies periodically as your organization grows and changes. Compliance professionals. Even the smallest organization needs to have someone who's keeping up with federal and state compliance requirements. If you have the resources, designate a compliance officer and empower that individual with authority, independence, and connection to people and information throughout the organization. Effective training. Educate your employees. Make sure they understand your compliance program policies. And Tony's going to provide some creative ways for effective training in the next segment. Effective communication. What we're talking about here is a way to facilitate communication between the compliance officer or contact and others in the organization. Comment boxes, anonymous hotlines, or even an open door policy are great. Just give your employees some way to report misconduct and protect those who do from retaliation. Internal monitoring. Conduct audits. This is the heart of any effective compliance program. You have to use some kind of review to evaluate how your compliance efforts are working. A good compliance program will identify problems from time to time. If it doesn't, that's a sign that what you're doing is not working. If you detect something problematic, then you're in a position to do something about it. Enforcement of standards. It's not only about developing policies, distributing them, and educating your employees about them. You also have to make sure your employees are actually following them. Take action when you learn that someone is not complying with procedures. And prompt response. When you get a report of suspected misconduct or other problem, look into it right away. Then take steps to resolve the issue as quickly as you can, and we're going to go over some ways that you can do that in session 2. So where can you look for more explanation to understand how to implement the 7 elements? OIG's published guidance is one place. And as I describe the different materials, I'm going to walk you through where to find them on our website. And these sites are also included in your handouts. And the following slides that I'm going to show simply replicate the OIG's live website, so they're not included in the downloadable materials. So just follow along with me for this part of the presentation. So we're starting out at OIG's homepage. It's located at oig.hhs.gov. You'll see the Fraud Prevention and Detection tab on the right-hand column of the page. And we're going to click on that, and that will take us to the majority of our guidance documents. I'm going to start with Compliance Program Guidance, which we refer to as our CPGs, and that is the bullet midway down on the page. There we go. Okay, so here are our Compliance Program Guidance documents. We've issued 11 CPGs and 2 supplemental CPGs aimed at particular providers and suppliers such as hospitals, nursing facilities, physician practices, third-party medical billing companies, just to name a few. Some of the CPGs are older than others, but they are all still good guidance to consider. And it's helpful to take a look at CPGs written for sectors other than just your own. The principles we lay out in these documents can be useful in context across the industry. For example, let's say you're a physical therapy group and you're looking to enter into an arrangement with a nursing facility. Well, we don't have a CPG for physical therapy groups, but it would make sense to check out the CPG and the supplemental CPG for nursing facilities to see what fraud and abuse risk areas might apply to your arrangement. And a quick tip for those of you who already have a compliance program in place, the 2005 supplemental CPG for hospitals has a section entitled Regular Review of Compliance Program Effectiveness. And the last 3 pages of that document provides a list of questions that you can ask to measure the effectiveness of your compliance program. Now, it's written for hospitals, so it's written in that context, but you can modify the questions to make sense for your organization. Risk areas. You've heard us talk about risk areas quite a lot, so I'm going to take a minute and explain exactly what we mean. When we prepare a CPG, we consider public comments, OIG and CMS statutes and regulations, CMS transmittals, program memoranda, and other guidance, the federal fraud and abuse statutes, together with the anti-kickback safe harbor regulations, OIG advisory opinions, special fraud alerts and bulletins, investigations conducted by OIG's Office of Investigations, the FBI, Department of Justice, reports issued by OIG's Office of Audit Services and our Office of Evaluation and Inspections, and we also consult industry advocates. After gathering all of that information, we are able to identify the types of fraud and abuse that we see in a given industry sector. And when we describe these specific types of fraud and abuse in the CPG, we call them risk areas. So let's pull up the 2008 supplemental CPG for nursing facilities. Okay, so this is what a CPG looks like. It has been published in the Federal Register. 3 columns, tiny print, pretty dense, kind of scary. Looks like a document for lawyers. But read on, I assure you it's written for everyone in the industry to understand, not just lawyers. In this document, you'll find the 7 elements and other principles to consider when designing a compliance program. You also find the useful overview of the fraud and abuse laws that Meredith just went over. And you also find the highlighted risk areas, the particular risk areas that apply to that industry sector. For example, free goods and services, swapping arrangements. We go into detail describing what types of problematic practices to watch out for. And don't forget the footnotes. The footnotes have all kinds of links to regulatory citations. We actually put a lot of work into the footnotes, and I use them myself all the time when I'm trying to find a regulatory site quickly. Okay, next we're going to move on to fraud alerts, special advisory bulletins, and other guidance. Now you'll notice we're still under that fraud prevention and detection tab. So these documents identify more specific instances of fraud and abuse. They are much less dense than the CPGs, as they typically focus on one topic or issue that OIG wanted to highlight. I would encourage you to scroll through these guidances on these pages. There might be a piece of guidance directly on point that answers a question you have about your business. And if you're navigating between the fraud alerts, bulletins, and other guidance, you can see how to do it in the little box in the middle of the page. And finally, advisory opinions. The advisory opinion process allows parties to seek formal and binding legal guidance from the OIG about specific business arrangements. We do not issue opinions on hypotheticals. But as long as you're a party to an arrangement or in good faith plan to enter into a proposed arrangement, you can write into the OIG with a full description of the facts, and we will analyze whether it runs afoul of the anti-kickback statute or the CMP provisions. The process for requesting an advisory opinion is laid out in the form of frequently asked questions. So again, to the little box in the middle, and there they are. So when you have a procedural question, go to the frequently asked questions. And if you're looking for an advisory opinion that we've issued on, if we're looking for all of the advisory opinions that we've issued on a particular topic, a great way to perform a search is with the advanced search feature, and it's a little bit hard to find on the website. It's actually at the bottom of the page in the teeny tiny print under the search box that says advanced search. So if you click on that, you can put advisory opinion in the exact phrase field and enter a search term like swapping. And that will pull all of the advisory opinions with the word swapping in it, so you can start your review there. Now, I'm going to pull up one so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is an advisory opinion. A couple things to keep in mind as you read an advisory opinion. It only offers protection from prosecution for the party who made the request. They have no application to and cannot be relied upon by any third party. That said, we publish these opinions for a reason. They can serve as excellent guidance because we will apply consistent analysis to consistent facts. Now I'd like to present something new for everyone in our audience. In the coming weeks, the OIG website will have a new look and feel. I'm providing a simple preview today, as the new site is still undergoing final reviews, but you all are getting the exclusive first look. While we have reorganized the site to make it easier to find the guidance materials, reports, and other publications, the navigational aspects of the new site are very, very similar to what I just demonstrated. If you can find the materials on our current website, you will be able to find them on this new site. The updates are simply designed to make everything more intuitive and even easier to find. For everyone who likes to worry out there, I'm sure there's quite a few in a crowd of compliance professionals. Rest assured, just because the website looks different, I guarantee all the guidance documents that I just showed you will be there. And we at OIG are continuing to explore additional ways to provide meaningful guidance and outreach to you on our website. So now that we've covered the basics, I've showed you some guidance documents, I'd like to wrap up with just some takeaways from this presentation. And these are particularly tailored to people who are starting out in their compliance efforts. So tip number one would be make your compliance program a priority now. Mandatory compliance plans are coming soon enough. If you don't have a compliance program and you're sitting there feeling overwhelmed by what I presented today, think back to the 7 elements. What's one thing you can focus on today? Start there. Tip number 2, know your fraud and abuse risk areas. Check out the CPGs, the fraud alerts, the special advisory bulletins, which we just discussed, and review the types of fraud we've identified. Knowing the risk areas will help you better tailor your resources and better tailor your compliance program and better focus your resources. Tip number 3, manage your financial relationships. Check all contracts or other financial arrangements for compliance with the law before you enter into them. And just because someone tells you it's all perfectly legal, check it out for yourself. Does the arrangement seem too good to be true? Maybe it is. Once you enter into arrangements, put in place a system to keep track of them. Be sure that your accounts payable department has access to the info so they can check the proper arrangements are in place before any payments are made. And tip number 4, this is my favorite tip. Just because your competitor is doing something doesn't mean you can or should. I get calls on this all the time. If your competitor is skirting the law, you should not be persuaded to do the same. Instead, report what you are seeing to OIG at 1-800-HHS-TIPS, which you'll see in your handouts. But you can also submit information and materials online. On OIG's homepage, you can simply click on the big red button that says Report Fraud, looks like the one on my slide here. That will take you to a site that walks you through submitting a report step by step. Now please understand, if you make a report to the OIG, we're not going to give you updates on how the investigation is going. You're partners in crime, but there are limits. And trust me, the hotline and the website is the best way to make a report. It goes straight to our Office of Investigations, and you can make an anonymous report if you so choose. The bottom line here is to stay on the right side of the law. And lastly, when in doubt, ask for help. OIG and CMS can point you to published guidance, and OIG can opine on specific arrangements through the advisory opinion process. But also keep in mind there are trade associations, compliance peers, healthcare attorneys and consultants, numerous places you can turn to for help. As a compliance professional, there may be times when you exhaust your personal expertise on a particular issue. When that happens and you need help analyzing a situation, it's time to reach out. Thank you, and I'd like to turn things over to Tony Maida for his presentation on operating an effective compliance program.